Proposition 5. If an oblique cone is cut by a plane through the axis at right angles to the base, and is also cut by another plane on one hand at right angles to the axial triangle, and on the other cutting off on the side of the vertex a triangle similar to the axial triangle and lying subcontrary-wise, then the section is a circle, and let such a section be called subcontrary. Let's start this off by talking about what subcontrary-wise means, because I find this to be a overwhelmingly confusing enunciation. So imagine that this is the axial triangle, like ABC. In the last proposition, what we did was we had a section where this side is parallel to this side of the triangle. And that made this angle equal to this angle, and this angle equal to this angle. In a right cone, you have basically an isosceles axial triangle, which means that the angles at the base are going to be equal anyway. So you'll never have a situation in which you're going to draw a parallel and these two angles aren't also going to be equal. So that's why we're talking about only an oblique cone today. If you have an oblique cone, however, you could create similar triangles by drawing a line parallel to the base like this, or you could create similar triangles by taking this angle, imagine this angle is right for instance, and drawing a right angle against this side, because in this case this angle at the top is the same as this angle at the bottom, and this angle here is going to be the same as this angle here. So that's a second way that you could draw a similar triangle within another larger triangle, which only works if the axial triangle is not an isosceles, which will be the case if it's an oblique cone. So all of this enunciation is saying is that we're going to construct a section so that this angle here, where the plane hits, is going to equal this angle here. Okay, I had to restart, but this is what we start with in our construction. Fuck. And we're going to pick any point along GK, and I'll label this F. And we're going to draw a line perpendicular to the axial triangle, meaning ABC. And we'll label this H. And over here on BC, we'll do the same thing. We'll pick any point, and we'll drop a perpendicular to the axial triangle. And we'll call this ML. So because we have, I didn't draw this very parallel, did I? Well, because we have dropped two perpendiculars to the same plane, these two perpendiculars will be parallel to one another. So FH, LM parallel. Then we're going to draw a line through F parallel to the line BC, and we'll label this line DE. So you remember from the last proposition that if you have a cutting plane parallel to the base of a cone, it'll also cut off a shape of a circle on that cone. So I'm going to draw a circle around DHE, and honestly I'm just going to freehand this. Wow, beautiful. So it's a property from Euclid that if you have a circle with a diameter, and you pick some point and cut off a perpendicular from that diameter, that the rectangle made with the two parts of the diameter is equal to the square on this part of the perpendicular. So, I mean, literally, like, if you drew a square made up of this length all the way around, and you do a rectangle with one side this length, and the other side this length, this rectangle would be equal to this square. Ancient geometry is full of sort of tricks with equating areas like that, because that's sort of all they have to work with, and I think it's pretty interesting. So we know that this is a circle, so any perpendicular to a line on the diameter will have that property. So the portions of the diameter DFFE, if you made those into a rectangle, it would be equal to the square on FH. So we don't even need to prove that, it's just a property of circles. So then I'm going to highlight some triangles. One of these triangles is going to be DGF. One of these triangles is going to be FEK. And we're going to try to prove that these two triangles are similar. So obviously these two opposite angles are going to be equal to one another. And if you think about the triangle ADE and ABC, the lines DE and BC were constructed parallel to one another. So that means that this angle right here is equal to this angle right here. And if you think about the triangle AGK and ABC, the triangle AGK was constructed subcontrary-wise. And as we talked about earlier, this means that basically it's a similar triangle, but the angles are flipped. So the angle down here at B would be equal to the angle down here at K. And like in all triangles, the angles in them add up to two right angles. So once you have two angles equal, you know that the third angle is also equal. So we have similar triangles. So let's switch back to purple. In similar triangles, their respective corresponding sides are proportional to one another. We did that last time, but in this case, it's a little bit harder to see because these triangles are sort of flipped relative to one another. So I'm going to go through this, which is EF is to FK as GF is to FD. And one easy way to check that you're using the right lines in the triangle is that they'll be opposite of equal angles in their respective triangle. So EF corresponds to FK as GF corresponds to FD. So in this, FD corresponds to FK because they're opposite of the three strike angles, and EF corresponds to GF because they're opposite the two strike angles. So I hope that's not too much busyness going on in the diagram, but we've established this now. So now Euclid 616 is something that I like to call means and extremes. That's sort of a shorthand, but what this means is that if you have four lines that are proportional to one another, doesn't matter if they're in similar triangles, could be any proportion, circle the middle two terms and circle the external two terms, and the rectangle made out of the external two terms will be equal to the rectangle made out of the internal two terms. So the rectangle DF FE is equal to the rectangle KF GF. So let's look on the diagram. We've got DF FE, and we've got KF FG. Well, we noticed that one of these sets of lines were the parts of the diameter that we had blocked off earlier when we were talking about the circle and the square on the perpendicular being equal to the rectangle on the diameter. So we had already talked earlier about this rectangle DFFE. Now it's coming up again, DFFE. So we can do a substitution. If this rectangle is equal to this rectangle, we already have proven that that was equal to the square on FH, then this rectangle is equal to the square on FH. So I've written that out, KFFG equal to square FH by substitution. Now let's look at that. KFFG, this parts of this diameter, are equal to the square on FH, which is a perpendicular drawn from that diameter to a point on the circle. Well, we don't know it's a circle yet. So when I talked about this strange square on one side, rectangle on the other side, circle argument in Euclid, it's also sort of a defining property of circles that this property holds no matter what point on the circle you choose to drop a perpendicular from. So if we could have dropped the perpendicular FH anywhere along this line GK, and we could have, that's how we constructed it, and it would have retained this property, then we know that this shape GHK can only be a circle. So I've written out here, only circles have the property that for any perpendicular drawn to the diameter, the rectangle made of the parts of the diameter is equal to the square on the perpendicular. So the section is a circle. So that's QED.